or take for granted that decolonization has a stable, unproblematic understanding amongst its users. Uh, may not be the case. Although I'm one of those who think it shouldn't be a problem, because, but maybe I'm not right. My presumption was that we know what colonization and colonialism is, but maybe I'm not right. Maybe even colonization and colonialism do not have a stable, uncontested, unproblematic, singular. Oh, so they've not been hearing me. Yeah. Hey, sorry, colleagues online, I left you again out in the lurch. We're all still trying to become digital human beings. Apologies. So I was just saying, colleagues online, I apologized for the. I thought we'd get back at 10:45. We only got back at 10:55. I apologize for that 10-minute delay, and I was informing colleagues that the others in the room are coming from lunch, and I was trying to encourage colleagues to please make full use of the remaining time today to engage. I spoke with Prof. Siepe, and the idea that colleagues should engage as much as they can remains. So my job would not be so much to limit people to time, but more to encourage people to really engage, to ask questions, to make comments. And then I proceeded to speak a bit of one of the points raised in the previous session, where our colleague, Professor Vezi Magigaba, said something about, and I think we glossed over it then. She said something about understanding and articulating one's understanding of decolonization, and to not assume, to not take for granted that it may have an unproblematic, a stable, singular definition to everyone who uses the term. I think I'm on one side of the spectrum in this debate. I'm on the side that thinks it shouldn't be a problematic idea, but maybe I'm wrong. As Professor Brown said, decolonize, the etymology of the term from colonize to undo to reverse. I tend to think it should be that. But one of the speakers we had last year, one teaching and learning program, Dr. Mpofu from WITS, he talked about propagandist definitions of colonization. And there are several discourses these days, and I think whether we like it or not, I don't like it. I don't like the idea that it seems people don't understand what decolonization means. I think it's scandalous when people say that, but I think it's the reality now. Many people have different ideas. Mpofu thinks it's because some people deliberately put out confusion as part of the pushback against decolonization. Because if decolonization is, if it is actually insurgent, which we should agree it is, then it's going to get pushback. It's going to get pushback from the powers that be. And I think that's one of the pushbacks, is to get people to say, to try to render the term meaningless, to try to make the term mean everything, even obvious illogical contradictions, such that it becomes meaningless, because that's how to make a term useless. If it means life and death at the same time, if it means yes and no at the same time, if it means proceed and don't proceed at the same time, then it lacks analytical utility. It lacks conceptual integrity. But I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. So it's time to get the conversation going. I'm still missing Prof. Brown and Prof. Siepe. Oh, okay. Uh, we still have Prof. Moyo. So more questions, more comments, please. And we are looking at, in front of our minds, 1 second. We have the question that is slated there for us, the implications and applications of contemporary politics. What does that imply for what we do? But if you permit me to make official what I just said a bit unofficially, would we like to comment on how we understand decolonization? What does it mean? In broad terms, and maybe also in specific terms, in terms of our work as academics, as participants in knowledge creation, knowledge generation, knowledge dissemination, as teachers, as researchers. I will be very happy to have some comments on that, or any other thing that any colleague might want to raise that might be specific to the previous presentations and the previous engagements. Yes, colleagues? Prof, you want to go first? Please do. What do you prefer?
I cannot hear.
Yeah, for the online audience.
Just stand there next to me.
Okay.
Um, all right. The one thing that I just think about decolonization and what again back to our students, what our students need is something that we've tried, and then unfortunately COVID happened, etc. I think we need a module where students right through the spectrum, like what we had at UniZulu 100, where the students right through the spectrum are exposed to some basic things in social citizenship, um, the rule of law, how to communicate properly, what is the meaning to be a UniZulu student, etc. So if I think about degrees, say for instance, and if we're now thinking colonial or international, but that is something that is quite typical about a first degree. That a first degree is made up with more modules that round you off as a proper citizen and not always as a specialist. And I think what we've done in South Africa is to immediately say, choose what you want to specialize in, and you are put right there into the specialized subjects without making students aware of exactly how does it fit into a broader package. I'm thinking, colleagues, about a BCom student where they get a very limited contact with law, for instance, and nothing with public admin, nothing with ethics. Um, that might be where we lack to expose students to what they really need. They become specialists very early. Um, whilst I think if you look at the European and the American examples, they have 1 or 2 years of basic training, broader spectrum training, and that is the years that you can build up. This the confidence in themselves because they all have this exactly. That is the 2 years. If you still need some additional training in maths or science or whatever they need, that they can do that. So, Prof. Moyo, back to what unfortunately I thought was because we were one of the pilots, um, I thought it was one of the best interventions in terms of with the UniZulu 100, and unfortunately, COVID worked against us because it is something that must be offered face to face, and you have to work closely. But that is just a comment in terms of the broader directions.
Thank you, Prof. Yes, can we take that forward, please? Yes, the step forward.
Uh, greetings, greetings to everyone. I just thought I need to say something as well because the concept of decolonization has been with us for quite some time, and it has been spoken only at higher levels, and we were only commenting amongst ourselves as lecturers, especially down there. But today we've been afforded an opportunity to express our views. But in most cases, when we engage in discussions with my fellow colleagues, would say, what is decolonization? We wouldn't understand. There's a colleague back, I think around 7 years ago, I was in UP for some training. So, and she's a doctor of economics now there at UP. She asked me, what is decolonization? And the way she asked, she was already imposing that we don't understand that there's nothing such as decolonization. So I also said to myself, because I also became blank due to the question, I said, no, I also don't understand what decolonization is. And which was true then, but it's still also true. But what I've discovered is that maybe we have started decolonizing, maybe we haven't started, but uh, for now we all don't understand, and it's as though we expect someone to come from somewhere to explain to us what colonization is, when in actual fact it's these engagements are actually sending us back to look for decolonization. So also, as I've been sitting since morning, I've been saying to myself that, I'm young, and I do not know, I don't give myself much time to read on the colonial laws. I only know that we were colonized by Britain. And so I only see a few things and I assume that, oh, these are the consequences of colonization, and such that I also uh, battle with the difference between colonization and civilization, which makes me to ask myself, what when I'm decolonizing myself, what do I need to decolonize? Is it the clothing I'm wearing? Is it even religion? Is it was it part of colonization and so forth? So uh, one of my views is that um, we need to go back and understand, especially us who are still young, and understand what was the colonial rule. And I'm sure it was institutionalized, it was structured. What were these structures? What were they doing? And also, what did it lead to specifically? And then we look at those things so that when we're starting to decolonize, we know that this is what we are decolonizing. Or no, this one we are not decolonizing because it is not as a result of decolonization and so forth. So my main point is basically to say that maybe we need to study colonization before we even speak further about colonization. Prof. Siepe also touched on the fact that in order for us to analyze what we need to do, to discover what we need to do, we have to look at reality, the reality that has been brought about by colonization. And also, importantly, we need also to look into the future. We need to look into what are we willing to achieve with decolonization, so that we are able to measure the stance that we have taken as far as decolonization is concerned. Because if we do not know what goals, what we wish to achieve, then we might not know how much our effort what has been produced by our effort as far as decolonization is concerned. And also there was a question of involving students. And also there was a good answer which said we first ought to understand what decolonization means. Then we involve students because students are the younger generation. When they woke up, they only found us in the consequences of colonization, which they thought it was just normal. So we need to understand ourselves so that we're able to pass the understanding to them first of this is what colonization was, this is how we are here. So what are you wishing for to undo this thing and so forth? Thank you. Stop there.
Yes, I think that deserves applause. I'm not going to spoil the momentum, if that's the right word to use. I'm going to ask somebody to just jump on that and carry on from there, please. I'm actually not very ideal to moderate this kind of discussion because I've got so much ideas of my own which I might inadvertently use to pollute or to dilute what people are saying. Yes, Prof. Kozwai. Prof. And then you. Prof. Yeah. Please, the digital people need to have it. Sorry. And the colleagues online as well.
Colleagues, there's always an example that I use when trying to clarify this concept of decolonization. There is, because I'm a curriculum person, and in curriculum, there's curriculum politics, where curriculum is viewed as a political tool. How can curriculum be used as an oppressing tool, oppressing the mind? So, okay, this example, I think my colleague will maybe get some sense on this one. When we talk of, like, for instance, pedagogy, you can use pedagogy to turn things around, to work on misconceptions, allowing students to engage with whatever. It could be a problematized activity where students will be trying to come up with their own understanding. So this example is of two students in a classroom where a teacher was teaching them about universe. That was a science subject, physics, right? Natural sciences. So the teacher was saying the sun is static and the planets are rotating around the sun. That is the fact according to the teacher, and student has to learn that. And the geography teacher came in to teach about the same similar subject. You see this seamlessness in knowledge. But the students, this student showed the teacher that there is a lie in this. Because the geography teacher says, do you know the directions, the east, north, and south? Student said, yes. Said, okay, where does the sun rises? Where does the sun rise? And where does the sun set? And the student said, there is madness here. Somebody said, the sun does not move. But now, this one is saying the sun rises. How can the sun rises how can the sun rise? Because it's static, is at the center of the universe. And this student said, who is a liar between two of you? Do you understand what you are teaching? Is this what you know? This child was so brave. Do you know what you teach? Or maybe you teach from the book something that you yourselves do not know. So the teacher said, go to the book. Said, so why do I come to school then? Because if I want to know about this, I can read it from the book, which is also a liar. So what I'm trying to say here is, that's how decolonization can actually be used, where you expose students to knowledge that they will interact with and try to find their own understanding. And then they can also pick up some misconceptions. And then they can also correct that with you facilitating that. So that's what I wanted to share with.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prof. Kozwai. I just wanted to do a quick throwback to Dr. Cheng when you were talking about the young and the old, because you said you were young. I hope I hope that it was not in contrast to the person standing next to you. I hope you meant Prof. Siepe and Prof. Tewari and Prof. Kasaram, whom I'm going to invite now. Prof. Kasaram, please come forward. Not me, I'm young as well.
Okay, I haven't prepared anything, but I'm just going to share my thoughts. Late last night, I was feeling sleepy, but I decided to read Prof. Siepe's book chapter, Knowledge in the African Universities, or something like that. And so the one phrase that caught my eye was, and it's what Mchengu said earlier that sort of alerted me to that point that I read last night. It was about the Gramscian interregnum, which explains, so interregnum means between kings. So it's that gap between when one king usurps the throne and before the other king comes in, there's a gap. And so it was used as a concept to explain the challenges we face in South Africa and the world, where you have the old order that has departed, but they still linger on. And in so many insidious ways that the status quo remains. And so it explained why the democratic government, for over the last 30 years, is still struggling to bring about change. Is because, and the way it was put forward, that you have a progressive force that's trying to bring about change, and you have a force that feel that it's the historical right to be privileged, that still maintains the old order in ways related to economics, etc. And so as a result, we get all the problems that we see in society. As a result, we'll get Economic Freedom Front, who would speak the language they do. As a result, we'd get problems related to monopoly capitalists versus rapid economic transformation. So we get all these tendencies emerging as a result of us not having the solutions. And so Mchengu said that we need to understand what is colonialism, what it did, and what do we need to transform. And very simply, the way I understand these interventions that has happened since 2022 is that we need to transform everything in South Africa as well as in the world. Because colonialism over the last, if you go back to the Roman times, then it's over the last 2,000 years. But if you go back to our recent history, it's about 500 years, and so on. And so what, to me, this whole endeavor is trying to establish is to say we need to see all of us as human beings, that we all have our ways of seeing the world, of experiencing the world, and these ways of seeing and experiencing the world has to be respected. And that's where we say that the epistemologies must be seen on an equal footing, that it must all be valued equally. But we, in the African context, we need to identify and accept and embrace those epistemologies that are relevant to us, that will enable us to transform our society. And maybe the world will be inspired by what we are doing, and will also look at transforming the global order. And so the starting point is we are all human beings, and we need to see each other on an equal footing. And so how do we engage comes to the curriculum. So if we look at our curriculum, where does my textbooks come from? All my textbooks are from the US. What Prof. Akupome was saying earlier about the economics aspect of it, it is all perspectives of a particular dominant political world order force. And so we need to break that by bringing in alternative perspectives. And so even if we bring in that perspective and say, well, this is a perspective advocated by World Bank, IMF, etc., but how is it being received by those who were historically oppressed or historically colonialized? How is being perceived by them? And what do we need to do? Well, what do we have to do in order to transform the way we're teaching our students, the way we're engaging with our students, with all these theories and all these perspectives that are based on the materials that are foreign to us in some respects? We need to endogenize what is useful to us. So we make what is a universal truth in terms of supply and demand, we make it relevant to us. But we also need to bring in the perspectives of, by us following, just say, structural adjustment or trade liberalization, that this is the impact it's having on us. And now what's the alternative? Let's go through some neutral forum. Like, for example, at the moment, I'm looking at climate change, and I'm looking at what the UN is trying to do with COP28, how they're trying to get all these different forces, because it's a problem that's universal, and everyone sees the need to transform. So COPE is trying to bring all these forces together to try and come up with common plans and common targets and common strategies. And it's not easy, but they are beginning to gain some sort of progress because the world is seeing the negative impact of climate change. And so, likewise, with transforming our society in the way we think, in the way we see one another, in the way we relate to one another in the global context, in the local context, we have to have similar forums to bring about these transformations. But we need to do it here, and we need to start off. And so it's great, it's very noble that UniZulu, of all places, has decided to take up the challenge. And so my view is that we need to start. We need to start with our curriculum. We need to start our students. It also reminds me of something that they've done in New Zealand. In New Zealand, the indigenous, so they're trying to make reparations and make amends and transform their society. So they asked their students, and it's a mixture of, from historically advantaged economies and so on that have settled there, together with indigenous people. And so they asked them to talk about your course, talk about which aspects you agree with, which aspects you have difficulties in accepting, and which aspects have embarrassed you as a person by referring to or making certain remarks about your culture or your value system, etc. And let's talk about it. And in this way, we will try to heal ourselves. And I learned that when I was doing the PG DIP. It was one of the papers, and it's a pity my external hard drive crashed, so I lost the paper, but the ideas, remain. And so thank you for listening to me.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, way to go, way to go. Thank you so much. Someone online, brilliant. We have succeeded in exciting that constituency. Which of the Buthelezis is this? Michael. Professor Buthelezi, go for it. I see your hand online. We see your hand online. Please,
Thank you,
the floor
Chair.
is yours. Yes.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Chair, you're dressing me on borrowed clothes
It's fine.
by addressing me a professor.
It's okay.
Okay, very exciting discussion. It has gotten me thinking and reflecting on about myself and also my own upbringing. I think within this context and notion, I was privileged that I was brought up from a rural area where things were like kind of African. So I only got exposed to this Eurocentric lifestyle when I went to study at university in Devon. So I would say that the problem that we are facing is entrenched. It's like we are swimming against a tide, Because if, for instance, we reflect on the schooling system there, and then the younger generation, our own children, we will see that democracy brought about changes. It's like it came to entrench this Western culture or the colonial culture on younger ones, because now with the democracy, they are able to intermingle with people from different backgrounds. And especially our education system has kind of broken down so that we, even children from townships and from rural areas, now they flock to study or to learn in a school that is in the city or in town, where, for instance, our languages are not even taught. So, and then they would hardly speak even their own language at home. So then the students that we accommodate at university level are from that background where they've already lost them being themselves, you know. So therefore, that's why I'm saying that here at the university, we find ourselves then swimming against the tide when we try to inculcate this decolonization of our curriculum in our education system. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be done. I fully embrace it because it saddens you when you kind of lose your self-identity. So, but I think the advantage that we have is the fact that most of these students that we admit at university level, they are still young. So it's never too late then to teach them new tricks. For instance, I teach constitutional law. I once asked my class this year whether there was democracy in Africa before the settlers arrived in Africa. And they all said, no, there was no democracy. And then I asked them, but look here how it was done according to uh, the traditional approach. For instance, you have when there's an issue that is affecting the community, Induna there is going to call the whole community under a tree, and then where you're going to have a man, you're going to have mothers, you're going to have even us kids there or children attending that imbizo, and then there will be a discussion about that issue whereby everyone will have an opportunity to express their opinion on the matter, after which a decision will be made. It's also kind of the same with the cases when there are people who must be disciplined or have committed wrongs against the community. So everyone is going to be called under a tree there by the Induna's house, and then the matters will be deliberated. Everyone can ask questions, kind of the cross-examination in the Western style. And afterwards, then Induna will then issue a verdict, and then the punishment or sentence will be also communicated. So I said to my student, well, isn't that a kind of democracy? Because everyone is able to express himself. But otherwise, in the Western style, we think of democracy as our ability to vote. We vote a person in a position of power. So what I'm basically saying that uh, there is a room for this decolonized education in order to help the students, especially as they are still young, to discover themselves. So basically, that's what I would like to add here. That I fully embrace it. It's an exciting concept, and it's available for all of us. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We can. Yes, so far it's uncut, uncensored, unedited. Please proceed, sir. Let's keep it fresh.
Hi, Mr. Spear from the Department of Public Administration. Um, what I think decolonization means, it means firstly, we should begin by identifying colonial biasness. How bias is this as opposed to what we know indigenously? And so decolonization, it requires first to identify this, the biasness, and how do we then move away from that biasness in terms of incorporating diverse, what you call voices that are not included, and the epistemologies, and also included into a curriculum, so to say. And mostly the marginalized voices and perspective and theories, and also what you call the contribution of indigenous scholars, which sometimes are looked down upon. You find that they are there in the repository, but never to be practically practiced in what you call classroom practices where we are at. The third one is the reflection practices, whereby then it includes students. How do students reflect in terms of how do they understand this kind of concept that you are explaining to them? Then it will help them to understand that their own, what you call perspectives have been shaped by what you call colonial legacies. How do they move then away from those colonial legacies and incorporate their indigenous understanding of the concept that we were trying to explain? So in terms of making an example, just in public administration, there are things that we can explain in a way that you can understand them easily in classroom in our indigenous language. Sometimes the language that is being used is quite complex for a student to understand, especially as a first year student. But there are some other ways in which you can, make the very same information to be known in a way that is more understood in the context where we are at. So I think that's part of decolonization, because this word colonization is a very broad concept in itself, because it have a different, what do we decolonize from? Those are the questions we should be asking, you see. So I think that's my contribution. Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Biga. Yes, do we have another hand in the room? Yes, yes. Prof. Tiwarai. Did I say it correctly?
Thank you, colleagues. Yeah, it's a great pleasure to be here and to learn about decolonization. So when colonial people came, they established structures and all kinds of things, and then they started affecting our philosophy, and we got used to that philosophy. They left, structures are probably changing, but our philosophy is not changing. So it's all this decolonial philosophy basically means we want to think differently. You know, what we are used to, we get out of that psychological entrapment and we think now independently, as Prof. Kashiram said and Prof. CAP said this morning. So first thing that. So, but it's a very illusory concept. Changing your chair, furniture, or the house is very easy. But changing your thinking is not easy. You tell your child 10 times same thing and he does the same thing again and again and again. So it's a big task to change this kind of philosophy. We need to create a grand narrative. Maybe we should have create a church of decolonial and where we are priest and then we can preach about decolonial, and that would be a fast way of changing the philosophy of the people. Okay, that's one. The second now, how do we translate that in a teaching class? I think the teaching is most important thing is we teach a student to be themselves, what they are. So once they are proud of what they are and they accept, even they can do a self-evaluation, but then they don't do the self-vilification. So that's the problem. When we evaluate ourselves and we start self-vilifying, vilification, and that creates problem. So if our students are confident and then so as a teacher, my role is not just simply transmitting the knowledge, but my role is to motivate and make the student confident what he is capable of. So I think these both the activities for a teacher are very important. Okay, then lastly, I like to say, borrowing the terminology of Prof. Moyo, I think decolonization will, if we do this, it will really affect our economy. It will improve our GDP. Now I will say how. Because when we are decolonized, we are straight thinking, all right, we will be morally better people, will make more morally right decisions. There will be a moral ecology in the workspace. You know, if everybody at the workspace is motivated by morals, you will not waste time. You'll work harder. You know, it's my duty. So this will create a bigger moral ecological space in the society and will be more productive. It will contribute to the GDP. So it's not simply a illusory concept of just we want to improve for improving sake. It has some economic repercussions as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Yes, do we have Prof? Are you still coming on? Okay. Okay, you can come and take the question. Come. Oh, you want to say it? Okay, I can echo you. Okay. Hmm. Yes.
The future is, what can I say? These students that we are taking to their future will not be our future. Are we literally engaging them to craft their future working from the present?
Hmm.
To me, it says both students and us, because we are in the present, looking at the pedagogies that will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, to say if we are both in the present, we are talking about decolonizing, which is the now, but for students, this is going to be the future. So the students, in my view, since they pioneered this idea, it means there is something that they have for their future, which is not will not be part of. So if we engage them as to what is it that they perceive in the future, so that we work in partnership with students. You know, why I'm asking this is because we it's us who are looking at decolonization. It means that, it means that, but we have not heard students' voice saying what is this decolonization to them, so that we work together towards the future of what we are talking about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Is there any pressing one as well? We are okay. Thanks for all the interventions. Let me try and end my pay for 2 minutes, and then I'll bring Prof. We have to invite Prof. Siepe to take us till the end of the session today. I've had very, very interesting perspectives, and Prof. Kuzwayo has brought us back where we started, the role of the students. Interesting, Prof. Because as Prof. Siepe told us at the beginning, at least this phase of decolonization, the ignition for this phase, this current intense phase of decolonization is the students. It's roads must fall, fees must fall. But it seems we want to lead them. Are we willing to let them lead us? As Prof. Siepe said, we were going into UCT and coming out and snapping pictures with the statue for decades. And this guy said, no, this statue shouldn't be here. But it seems we now want to lead them. Are we qualified to lead them? I'm problematizing. Should we perhaps be surrendering leadership? Should we perhaps be agreeing that we didn't lead and that they need to lead? As you have rightly said, the future is more theirs than ours, although I'd like to live to be 150. But we must think of that as well. It's also the question we ask about language. One of the colleagues was speaking and saying sometimes this language is difficult for the students. Is the language easy for us? I speak from a bit of an advantage working in language. Do we really think the language is easy for us? I don't think so. I don't think it's easy for us as well. And that brilliant question, what do we decolonize from? What do we decolonize from? How do we understand colonization? Brings us to the points, these are points we've all raised, brings us to the point of temporality, the way we conceptualize temporality. And I want to problematize this. Prof who spoke last spoke about the colonizers came and they left. Did they leave? I'm of the sense, I don't know, did they really leave? And there's a lot of interesting, Prof. Kasram also made this point, very important point, both you and Abun Shengo, of reading. You ask that question, we're waiting to be told what colonization is. Can we maybe go and find out what it is? Because it seems to be a huge feature, a very problematic feature of among many of us that we wait to be told. There's a terminology called received knowledge. This is what we receive. We wait to be taught rather than to learn. It seems, I'm not making conclusions, I don't have that power. I'm going to leave all these questions for Prof. Siepe to answer. So what do we think in terms, is it past? People like Morgan Nlovo, our former colleague, Morgan Nlovo has a very interesting article where he talks about, he's building, of course, on the work of many of the Latin American scholars, where they talk about where they came up with the concept of coloniality. Why they came up with that concept has a very strong temporal dimension because of the dominant idea amongst us to think of colonialism as something that is past. Coloniality, in coming up with this idea, the colleagues try to demonstrate that what changed is orders, not systems, suggesting that the systems remain. Suggesting it's up to you to accept or not to listen to the argument that we still have colonization, except in other ways. For an individual, from my own practice, it's I'm refraining, I'm retreating from the idea of post-colonialism and even post-apartheid. Because it's the way we conceptualize time. I take that very seriously. We tend to approximate, we tend to associate with the present that which we like. You know, we have these quarrels with our spouses all the time. She says you do this all the time. You say, no, I stopped doing it long ago, yesterday. And you always complain, forget that thing is in the past. You did it in the morning. You would like to think it's past. But your spouse and your children and your junior colleagues, they know that you will even do it tomorrow. So, I mean, is colonialism past? Is the system, the oppression, the biases, the violence, the disruptions, the dislocations that marked, the violence that marked colonialism, has it ended? It's a question we need to ask. Prof. Kuzo talked about contradictions in received knowledge. So how do we relate with received knowledge? How do we deal with those contradictions? The sun is at the center of the world, it doesn't move, yet it rises and it sets. How do we deal? And that's part of what I was saying earlier when I talked about economic theories. Oh, do not invite state intervention if you want your economies to grow. Give everything to the market. But when are you who are telling me you only grew by state intervention? Modern European economy was purely interventionist. They call it the Marshall Plan. I know I don't have a degree in economics, but I know that you can even find it on Google. These contradictions. And it's also part of what I was referring to, corruption. Oh, we are corrupt in Africa, that's why we are backward. But they are corrupt in America, why are they not backward? I mean, like, if corruption, if we accept, I'm not conceding, presupposing that we are corrupt, and that's why we don't have hospitals. How is it that their corruption does not prevent them from having hospitals? If indeed we are to accept that idea that the lack of infrastructure is equal to the presence of corruption. So it's questions I'm asking, guys. I'm not answering questions. Remember that I didn't study in this faculty. Um, so what is the colonial? How do we conceive of the colonial, of colonization, of coloniality? I think I really like this, your last point, sir, that it's going to have an effect on the GDP. Those people also have theorized that extensively. They actually make a more fundamental argument. Not that it's fundamental, let's say a more foundational argument. And they say that knowledge produces reality. That the kinds of knowledge that are privileged, the kinds of knowledge that are dominant, tend to produce the reality that you face. So other knowledges will provide other realities. So what is our reality? Takes us again back to the question the dean asked. What do we need? And what knowledges will take us, will provide us with what we need, or will move us towards what we need. I'm not sure now, because I'm becoming gray-haired. I don't think it's because of many questions that people have gray hair. My problem is that when I was even 20 years old, I already wanted to have gray hair. So that's why I'm beginning, and I really like it. I'm not old, but now I want to, I want to, I want to invite those who may be more comfortable with the adjective of old to give us the rounding off, a brief response to these questions, a brief comment on what we have been saying, because there's more in stock for tomorrow and the day after. Colleagues, it's my pleasure to bring back to the microphone for the closing Professor Sipo Siepe.
My daughter sent me a note saying, if you talk to God, then you are religious. But if God talks to you, then you are psychotic. And she expected a response from me, so I'm still mulling over that. Well, we started this morning, and in what we try to do is simple, is to historicize our location. We are not free floating in space like the like electrons that are not within their space of being located within the what you call delocalized electrons. We have a past, and that past weighs heavily on the present. And one of those is that we are people who come from, who are transiting from conditions of oppression, and we have heroes and heroines who have made the current dispensation possible. In a sense, we owe it to those people who died so that we can be able to enjoy the freedoms that we have today. But those who fought and gave their lives for us also indicated that the struggle is long. It's a long road. And Mandela put it as a long walk to freedom. But they were hoping that in sacrificing their lives, we'll also have a role to play. In my interaction with Nelson Mandela, one of the frustrations I had with him was him not speaking out as much as he should or should have done on the HIV/AIDS nonsense. And the question he asked me is that, but what do you guys want from us? We gave our lives so that you can be free. What are you doing with that gift of freedom? So, in a sense, what Mandela was saying exactly is what he said in the book, that that he has walked that long road. He tried not to make some missteps, but he found the secret that after climbing a great hill, there are many more hills to climb. So our whole policy environment at a higher level, at the macro level, is informed by that reality. And when we invited the minister to open the conference, that's one of the things that he says, that we need to connect the university to the human struggles, to the struggles of ordinary people, because we happen to be the most privileged. If you were to look at the participation rate of African people in higher education, we're talking about 5%. What it means that we are the most privileged, that for each child who starts in primary, the cohort that starts at what you call sub A or grade 1 to grade 12, about 50% of those children who are African don't make it to matric. And what it means that for a million that starts, only 500,000 gets closer to matric. And at matric, only a small portion, about 10%, make it to university. And of that, only a small portion graduate. So if you understand that, then you understand the privilege that we enjoy as those who have been able to escape this total onslaught on the African child. And therefore, it is a situation that should be disturbing to us, that despite the fact that we're a majority in this country, we're a minority when it comes to idea formation. We are even afraid to put ideas on the table. And they were given an opportunity at the University of Zululand to say this pattern, this past can be changed. So when the university decided to say we are going to establish or turn the university into a note for African thought, the Vice Chancellor was very clear that it is in this university that we are going to have the people who are going to form the vanguard to make sure that we don't continue to reproduce the geopolitical imagination of apartheid. And this is what we are doing when we don't disrupt the notion that the past must not be disrupted. So what we are calling for is, with the privilege that we enjoy, we can do something. And I'm also saying we are the children of the Mandelas, the Govan Begis, the Walter Sisulus. And the task that they faced was it was a mission impossible. I do not know how many people can imagine what it was in the 50s, in the 60s, when they had to face the military might of apartheid. The military might of apartheid. But the idea of freedom was so capturing that even with that which appears to be an obstacle, even that which appears to be a mission impossible, they said there'll be freedom in our lifetime. And so what we're faced with at the knowledge level, the mountains that we have to climb, they may have actually said, no, with these guys having all that and we us not having weapons. Actually, I happen to even have the privilege of attending the ANC 100 years celebration in Bloemfontein. And what was amazing there is that I met African leaders who spoke to us. And they were telling us about what happened in the early 60s and 50s, when only about 30 of them sat in a corner in Dar es Salaam and said Africa will be free. And at that time, Africa was not free. I mean, the people like Oliver Tambo had to cross the crocodile-infested rivers to go to places like Zambia. I'm simply putting the challenges that they faced so that today we can enjoy the freedom. So this notion of epistemic justice is bigger. It's part of the broader liberation struggle. And that struggle does not end with simply the right to vote. It ends with when we have right to be ourselves, to dream our dreams. So this is what the VC was trying to put, that the University of Zululand has embarked on that road. So we need to understand that. We have a book we produced a book, The Note for African Thought, that came from the conference. And I think it will also be a book that must be a must read by our colleagues at the university, because we brought the brilliant minds from as far as the US, as far as Ghana and all that too, and Jamaica to come and make presentations in terms of the idea of the Note for African Thought. So, but that expenditure means serious business. And all we require academics to do is to empower themselves and not to be afraid of freedom. The question was raised, do we have African scholarship in terms of literature, business, law, etc., etc.? This is the same question that when I spoke to some colleagues in at this university, when I talked about the need to develop African languages into becoming language of science, their immediate response was something that, where has it been done? Again, that actually shows their attitude towards a challenge. When they say, where has it been done, they simply want to see it done so that they can copy it. But that is a problem with Africa. Mimicry. That if it is not done somewhere, you're not going to try it. But what they fail to understand is
People have advanced so far. They have reached the galaxies precisely because they dared to dream. And they dared to say, we will do that. Can you imagine, when the 1957, when the Russians put Sputnik, a very small artificial satellite, into space, the size of a rugby ball. And the US president was told that these guys have launched something, an object in space. And when JFK looked at that, he said, we are not going to allow the Russians and the Soviet Union to outsmart us in the race for technological and scientific supremacy. And he decided that we will do better. We'll put the man on the moon. And then he says, we go to the moon, not because it is easy, but we go to the moon because it is hard. Within 10 years, an American walked on the moon. If I ask my colleagues the same, they will say, where has it been done before? So this is a crisis of confidence that we suffer from in the continent. The absence of daring, the absence, and the Mandelas, that's what they did, that despite this might, it was something that they would be free in their lifetime. Even some of us, when we're told about the struggle, when we participated in 1976, it was simply fighting for the right to be free, but we never imagined that we'd be free in our lifetime. But when young people decided to say freedom or death, when they defied even death itself, then you knew that we had reached the turning point. We are not being asked to die. We are simply being asked to fight for the African to be free. I mean, how much more of the gift can we be given? So that's what the VC tried to put, that you are privileged, that you can be the ones who will take the baton from these great heroes and take it elsewhere. And in that speech that Mandela gave, he showed a simple example of what an anti-colonial education can do. That when he listened to his own elders at home, he wished that history would be so kind that he could be part of that struggle. What more message can be bigger than that? So all I'm simply saying is that, as the Americans will put it, that in our country, as in any other country, the impossible is the least we can demand. The impossible is the least we can demand. So if you find this to be profound, look at the American struggle when they were in slavery, and they still created songs that talked about freedom, and they still talk about freedom and hope that it will happen in a lifetime. So I'm putting this as so that we can understand that our challenge is not a small challenge. But when I put that as not a small challenge, I'm also saying it calls for us to redouble our efforts, to arm ourselves. There's knowledge, there are books out there that can be read, that will empower us. And we cannot be vanguards if we don't do the spade work. I mean, our job is reading. When I used to, when my child used to ask me, what do you do? What are you paid to do? I said, I'm paid to read. And that's what you are paid to do, to read. And other people go through so much hell, and all you ask, read, read. And when you read, you become empowered. So I'm simply saying you have a bigger project, but it is doable. But you have far great leaders you can lean on to help you to move forward. And one of the, and the Gramsci, there's Gramsci needs to be read. Professor, you are talking about the Gramscian, the interregnum. In that, he also, when he talks about the interregnum, he also talks about the one of the important characteristic of any group that is growing to ascendancy. It's its ability to critique the dominant paradigm and tell them, but it should also simultaneously be able to elaborate its own thinking and its own organic intellectuals. So there's understandably, the whole notion of the old is dying, but the new cannot be born is what the interregnum is all about. But for you to do that, it means that there's the two elements. And I think Professor Brown was trying to emphasize the notion of decolonial, that there is the colonial, but there's also a D prefix about the undoing the colonial situation or the colonial damage. But there's also, it is not only about decolonial, it's also about the Africanization of knowledge. See, it is one thing to critique, but you must also elaborate. Because if you spend time only focus on undoing, you will not find even time to do. So there is as one of the professors said from the UK, from the Netherlands, that we should not run the risk of that in our attempt to decolonize, we then reinscribe coloniality. Because for as long as you spend time quarreling with some people, they set the agenda. So what we call for is also about changing the terms of engagement and also the terrain of engagement. And let me explain what I mean by that. It's simpler with examples. You know, Professor Moyo, when an eagle fights with a snake, on the ground, the snake is treacherous. And this eagle, what it does, it picks up the snake and goes up. Because up there, the snake has no grip. And it has difficulty also in breathing when it's taken up. But what the eagle does is to change the terrain of engagement. So when you are going to be spending time to fight people in their space, you actually may not be able to win them in that. So you must change the terrain of engagement. So when you reinscribe, you spend time trying to prove, like Verwoerd as a Verwoerdian entrapment. When you want to spend time saying you want to prove that you're equal to them, they say, but you can't be this, and you try to be that, then they shift again, you know. And you never get there. Like you've seen with our people here who go to white spaces. They go there, they become neighbors to white folks. Then they are watched. Then there's two of them. Then you see houses are now being sold. By the time 15 years later, the place that was completely white is now completely black. And then they go somewhere, then you go again, you there. Because you are permanently trying. So you no longer set your own agenda. And these are the realities. Because when you spend time trying to prove to some people that you can be this, you are also undermining your own humanity. And part of colonialism was the dehumanization of African people to where they lose confidence in themselves where they need to be led. This is why today we have a government that thinks that we should be chaperoned by historically white universities because we led that. So as Professor Brown was indicating that our engagement at this level will be first at the structural level, which is macro, where we look at policies, we look at the rules, we look at the funding, and we critique those. Then we come to the institutional level. Then ultimately it comes down to us, where we're located in the classroom. What type of programs do we offer? And also, we must take advantage, and we can only even move forward. What people are talking about the future. What we need to be alive to also is the reality of technology. I mean, I don't know how many of you know that one of the biggest debates in the last week in the US was what they call 4-day work week. They are beginning to say the technology makes it possible for people to now work for 4 days a week. And what they did, interestingly, is that they did a survey. The survey did not go to, it was not a survey of employees. It was a survey of employers. And the employers were saying, yeah, maybe 4 day a week makes sense. And there's some companies that have now introduced a 4-day work week because some of the work can be done through automation. So you're not going to go into that future by mimicking. You're going to go into the future when you're actually confident of where you stand, and then you can have that. And the second thing that I'd like to put here is also what the fourth industrial revolution is going to do. If you read what comes from those in that space, they're saying the kids who start in grade 1 now, about 60% of them will get in the jobs that do not exist. So if you also couple that, it is not the type of education that you can just prepare for because we don't know. The future has become very unpredictable. Actually, I don't know how many of you have heard of VUCA, because that's what the future is going to be. That it will be uncertain, it will be complex, and it will be ambiguous. There'll be a bit of ambiguity there. So but you're not going to be able to get into that if you lack the confidence of being. And when we talk about decolonial, it's also about reclaiming your humanity so that you don't enter the future being doubtful. So there are all those things that we need to be deliberate at the institutional level. We need to be deliberate in our classroom. We need to move from the context of being second class or third class citizens. And the students should be part of it. The truth of the matter is that the students are the ones who are actually pushing this. I mean, the issue of, you can actually Google that Professor Brown was talking about, why is my curriculum white? It is the students who are raising that question. Why am I not finding myself? Why am I not relating to these examples? And in this country, we've seen, as I indicated earlier, that the fees must fall and the roads must fall are part of the decolonial insurgent struggles that have been started and championed by students. They have addressed students at the number of universities, and interestingly, they say, but why have we not been given this text? But you're not given those texts because those texts are going to be affirming yourself. And on the issue of God, decolonizing God, all I remember was a nice question that when Mandela was asked about God, and he told the audience in America that the question of God is between him and his God. and so he's not going to venture into that space. But what you are also saying was making a distinction between being a spiritual being and also being a member of a church, which is an institution. But then you must also look at those institutions as well. I mean, if you take without insulting the Vatican Church, you need to ask why has there not been a black pope when there are so many people of Roman Catholic who are African. And even that question had to be asked because for too long, the popes came from Italy. The first pope outside Italy was a Polish pope. Now we have a South American pope. And even then, I don't know how many of you watch, if you have Netflix, watch The Two Popes. It's a very interesting discussion between the previous pope, who's is also a very interesting person to read. The previous pope, they say he was probably one of the brightest pope for a long time, and he's also the first pope to resign after more than 640 years, because popes don't resign; they die in office. But he said no, he wants to resign so that he can listen to what his successor is going to say, so that he can respond to him in case. No, but you need to watch that. It's a very interesting program, The Two Popes. It's you have it on Netflix, and they have that discussion. Which was sanctioned by both of them when they were still alive, because they were not agreeing about the doctrine. The Christinger, who's also among other things a former member of a Nazi youth group, who became a pope and who wrote extensively. I'm not Catholic. I'm a person who reads the Catholic stuff with the interest of critique, because it's one of the most dominant churches, and it has the biggest bank in the world. If you don't know that, So those of you who think about the banks, you should be thinking about the Vatican, and you should read Mario Puzo, who writes about the Godfather 3. It's a very interesting movie to watch as well, or you can read the book. But he's written extensively about the Pope and suggested that the previous Pope was also killed, and because he was going to clean the Vatican. But it's very interesting stuff about the power dynamics. And of course, when I happened to be in the space where we are receiving all these guys from Robben Island, and one of the people we met was Govin Becky, and he said something very interesting is about the church. He was a communist, and they were saying, while they were on Robben Island, one of the things that he missed the most was to listen, to hear the voices of children chuckling. And on Sundays, the warders would bring their kids to the church. There was a church on Robben Island for the warders. And then he says he always wondered that when these people say to God, give us our daily bread, he wondered whether they ever think that they also, as prisoners, need that, the daily bread, and whether they also want to have the sound of babies and children, And I mean, very interesting story about the Govan. I mean, that's also another person to study, and including Walter Sisulu. Fascinating stuff. But then the issue about what is to be done, you're not going to gain confidence by not doing anything. You need to start doing something, and you succeed, as they put there, nothing succeeds like success. So when people like Mahoba, actually, he has a book that I would like you to. I produced a book called tertiary transformation in South Africa revisited. I brought in some of the scholars I was with more than 22 years earlier. And I invited them to say, guys, more than 2 decades ago, we met and we made the following declarations. We made the following commitments. And I would like us to start thinking about what have we given to higher education 22 years later. And most of us had actually run universities. So the issue was, let's reflect. And Makoba writes, and I asked him to say, since you came back from the UK, what are the 5 lessons that you have learned about South Africa? And he puts them in this book. And we deal with also some of the things that happened, what derailed transformation. And transformation was actually derailed. When we talked about decolonization and transformation in 1998, in 1996, then what came was the discussion around the restructuring of institutions, that is the reorganization. And I remember Bani Pichana saying he fears that all the intellectual energy will be wasted on the restructuring. And as a matter of fact, all the energy has been on the restructuring, combining this university, combining University of Limpopo with Medunsa, then and cutting them again. Now there's a discussion about separating University of the Northwest, having Mafikian campus to be there, because all these measures are not workable. And I mean, there's also a story. So we wasted a lot of time on that. And in the process, most of the energy is not spent on curriculum issues, even at universities. Our crisis is more around managerialism. Our crisis is about marketization. Our crisis is around massification, what you call the 3 M's, the marketization, the managerialism, and the massification. How many students can you take and all that? But before then, the discussion was largely intellectual. We were imagining a different South Africa. But then we got blindsided by nonsense. And now we have an opportunity again to take up those debates. And this book, A Note for African Thought, will liberate most of you and will clear some of the cobwebs that you may have in the brain in terms of what the colonialism is and should be, and how to imagine the future.